Good morning, everyone, and very happy World Dugong Day from Campa Dugong Team Wildlife Institute of India. So, we will be starting our program in just a few seconds. Yes. So, World Dugong Day. It is a very, very important day for worldwide dugongs and Indian context specifically, as it started uh, on 2020, the first lockdown. We thought of it that we should have a World Dugong Day which celebrates and marks dugongs and their habitats. Uh, we came up with this idea in 2020. Everything was online. We and in online setup also we got amazing response for the World Dugong Day, and Convention of Migratory Species (CMS) recognized it. And today, after 4 years, we are here having all the world renowned experts for celebrating this World Dugong Day. So today we will be also having dignitaries from Wildlife Institute of India and Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change India. I would like to introduce Mr. Virendra Tiwari, who is Director, Wildlife Institute of India. He is from Indian Forest Services. He has joined the Wildlife Institute very recently, but his contribution in the marine programs is immense, as he was the pillar of Mangrove Foundation in Maharashtra, where reserve forests are declared. Uh, the mangroves have gotten their importance in the area, and we all are right now working under his guidance. So, Dr. Tiwari, Mr. Tiwari, I would like to welcome you for the opening remark. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you, Chinmay. So good morning. First of all, my wishes to all of you on occasion of World Dugong Day. So we know that dugongs are also known as sea cow. However, now it is fighting for its survival in Indian waters. So unless we conserve it, uh, on one day it may become extinct. So dugongs are endangered marine species like sea turtles, like sea horses, sea cucumber, etc. So in India, they are protected under Wildlife Protection Act under Schedule 1. They are also listed as vulnerable on IUCN Red List. As per 2013 survey report of ZSI, there are just about 250 dugongs left, and they are particularly found in Gulf of Mannar in Tamil Nadu, Andaman and Nicobar Island, and Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat. So we already have so many experts, but just for the beginners. So dugongs, they graze on seagrasses, and the loss of seagrass beds due to ocean floor. Trawling is the most important factor behind dwindling dugong population as they damage the seagrasses. The proper conservation is the only way to save dugongs from extinction. The depletion will have effect all the way up the food chain. Now, India has already signed non-legally binding MOUs with CMS on conservation and management of dugongs in the year 2008. MOFCC has constituted a task force for conservation of dugongs to look into issues related to dugongs and implementation of UNEP CMS Dugong MOU. Wildlife Institute of India has different projects including turtles, whales, mangroves, and Dugongs. The Kampa Dugong project of Wildlife Institute of India started in year 2016, and with continuous efforts of 7 years, WII has achieved many milestones in the area of dugong conservation through the project. Through WII's effort of only research but also community conservation, we managed to come up with management plans of two marine national parks and one dedicated conservation reserves for dugong. On World Dugong Day, WI is proud to host Dr. Helene Marsh, world's leading dugong expert, along with an international panel of experts to have a fruitful discussion regarding future of the dugong. So with this remark, I once again wish you all on this World Dugong Day, and we are looking forward to have a very interesting and fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that great opening remark and giving overall idea about dugongs and their conservation in India. Next, I would like to invite Rakesh Kumar Jaginiya, who is the Deputy Inspector General of Wildlife in Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Sir, I would like to request you to give inaugural remarks for the session.
Thank you so much, Chinmaya, and respected Director Saab, and the entire August gathering present in this celebration of World Dugong Day 2023. Let me also first congratulate Director WII and his team for initiating this wonderful event on World Dugong Day 2023, and wish you all a very happy World Dugong Day. I'll just begin with the quote from Tamil poetess Avayar, who said that what we know about the world is just a handful of sand, and what we don't know is the entire universe in it. We have just celebrated the World Biodiversity Day on 22nd of May 2023, just last week. And Honorable Prime Minister in one of its Man Ki Baat edition had said, what we know about the biodiversity, and when we try to know about the biodiversity, we only learn that there is much more to know about the biodiversity. And he invoked the Tamil poetess Avayar and said that there is a need to conserve, preserve, and explore more biodiversity. And probably these are the days, the commemorative days, like the World Biodiversity Day and World Dugong Day, and many such days which we celebrate, are a step, an effort from our side to let people know about these species, about the threat they are experiencing, the threat their habitats are experiencing, and we try to make effort to let people sensitize about the need for their conservation, preservation, and to explore to know more and more about them. Government of India, after the launch of Compensatory Afforestation Project, Compensatory Afforestation Act in 2016, embarked upon that fund to tap it for the conservation and protection of wildlife. Many people don't know that the Compensatory Afforestation Fund can also be used for a species recovery program. But the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, in the first year of enforcement of Compensatory Afforestation Project, realized and tapped the funds available in the Compensatory Afforestation Fund for funding a species recovery program for 4 very less known endangered species found in India. These are the dugong, the the great Indian bustard, the Sangai deer, and the Gangetic dolphin. Of these, Dugong is the only marine species which has been, which for the conservation of which the compensatory afforestation funds have been used. Government of India allocated about 100 crore rupees in 2016 for funding the species recovery project for all these four species. And recently we have amended the Wildlife Protection Act in order to empower the Coast Guard to carry out search, seizure, arrest, and detention in the offenses which in which the dugongs or and other marine species are involved. It is very important to get allocated these funds for the species recovery program for these species, as Government of India recognizes the importance of flagship species, and we have always believed that the protection and conservation of these flagship species result in the protection and conservation of the other fauna and flora found in the habitats of these flagship species. MOEFCC handed over these projects to WII in the year 2016, and they have not only worked on dugongs but also with all the stakeholders, including the forest and defense services like the Coast Guard. These government agencies are now able to conduct underwater surveys to understand the marine life even better. We are sure that in upcoming years, Campa Dugong project will come up with new milestones, and I would end by saying the most talked about quote by our honorable minister, who always says that whatever ecological wrong we have done, we need to convert and we need to harmonize ourselves with the ecology and also ensure the ecological connectivity. Our Minister of State always says if we want to make our future bright and sustainable, we need to conserve and respect our culture and nature. Once again, I would like to thank all the ones who are present here in this VC and also others who are connected through YouTube or other streaming partners. A very happy World Dugong Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for that uh, nice inaugural talk. We will head towards our keynote talk. I would like to add Dr. Helen Marsh.
Thank you very much.
I I would like to introduce you first for all the audience,
Okay.
and I will be extremely shameless to say that I am starstruck today. It has been a dream to watch you, to have been interacting with you. It is just amazing. Dr. Helen Marsh is an emeritus professor in environmental science, and she is a professorial fellow at James Cook University. She leads the Threatened and Migratory Species and Threatened Ecological Communities mission in National Environmental Science Program in Australia. She is like, it is the associated name with Dugong. Any aspect of Dugong you take out, and Dr. Helen Marsh will be there. We are so honored to have you here, and we can't wait to have your talk on this World Dugong Day. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very honoured to be here and to be able to speak to this audience. I came to India a long time ago in 1987 to talk about dugongs, and it's very pleasing to see that they are much more of a high priority species now than they were then. And I am looking forward to learning a lot more about what you are learning about your dugongs. So I would like to use some slides for my talk, and I will try and share the screen.
Sure, please go ahead.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm really honoured to be able to give this keynote lecture today. So I want to talk about three things. I want to give you some important facts about dugongs. I know that you know a lot about them, or many of you do, but these facts that I'm going to talk about today are have been carefully selected because they're things that I find when I review papers that people often make assumptions that aren't quite correct. And so I just want to outline some those key facts. I also want to talk about the likely impacts of climate change, some of which is projected, of course, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And I'd like to invite you all to contribute to a revised Dugong status report. You heard that India is a signatory to the Dugong CMS MOU, and under that, there is the status report that was developed 20 years ago and which is now terribly out of date, is going to be updated. At least I think it is. A contract has been drawn up, but it hasn't yet been signed. And for this to be a success, we need help from everyone. And I want to talk to you about that. Okay, so one of the things that people forget about dugongs is that their habitat can extend over such a wide range. So it can extend from intertidal estuarine areas, I think everyone knows that, to coastal regions down to at least 35 metres. Now, that doesn't happen everywhere, of course, because seagrass communities will only grow where the light can reach. And if the water is very turbid, the seagrass is not going to grow to 35 metres. But I think it is very difficult to assume that seagrass will only grow in relatively shallow water, and that seagrass dugongs will only feed in intertidal waters. And in the papers I review, and I'm not specifically talking about India, people often make that assumption. So remember, the depth range for dugong habitat can extend to quite deep waters, down to 35 metres. Doesn't always, in fact, it often doesn't, but don't forget it. The next thing that people tend to forget is that dugongs are not what I call wilderness animals. They can occur very, very close to cities. So this photograph on the left of my screen is taken from Johor Strait near Singapore. And you can see the skyline of Singapore in the background. This is the busiest shipping lane in the world, and yet we see dugong feeding trails in the shallows on the Malaysian side very frequently. This photo in the middle is from a coal port in Queensland, Australia, where I live. I don't live in Gladstone, but I live in Queensland. And you can see the seagrass bed right next to the coal port, and you may also see some dugong feeding trails in that seagrass bed. That can be a dangerous place for a dugong to be, probably not as dangerous as Johor Strait, but still. And this huge herd of dugongs in very clear water actually occurs in Moreton Bay, which is the bay adjacent to the city of Brisbane, which is the third largest city in Australia. Now, Australia doesn't have mega cities like India, but there are still several million people living in this general area. Fortunately, these seagrass beds are quite oceanic and the water is rather clear, but these large herds occur regularly there. So just remember, just because a place is has a lot of development doesn't mean that the dugongs won't occur there and won't go away. And of course, the risks to them of living in those fairly populated areas stand. The next thing is that I call dugongs dugong seagrass community specialists, but I want everyone to remember that they don't only eat seagrass, and that the story that is throughout the literature that Hologily and Holophila are the preferred species isn't always true. In dugong habitats, there is typically a lot of Hologily and Holophila of various species, and the Holophila are the only species that grow in the deeper waters where dugongs can occur. But dugongs can also eat marine algae. In some places, it seems they only eat marine algae. They have been recorded eating mangrove leaves, which at high tide below the surface, and they have been recorded targeting marine burrowing invertebrates, marine worms, and species like that in seagrass communities. So I think it's very important to realise that although they certainly eat seagrasses, and mainly eat seagrasses, they don't only eat seagrasses, and sometimes they occur in algal covered areas where there are no seagrasses. The next thing is that people tend to think that the above ground biomass of seagrass is an indicator of good dugong habitat in the range. That's not always true either. So this is an area, an intertidal area at low tide. You can see that the above ground biomass of seagrass is very low indeed. This picture shows a dugong moving along the bottom with its using its flippers. Some people call that peck walking. It doesn't always occur. You can see, and we can see some dugong feeding trails in the area. So don't be tricked. Sometimes dugong habitat has very low biomass of above ground seagrass. And lastly, dugongs have two feeding modes, and people tend to think that they always leave feeding trails in the seagrass bed. That's not true either. So here are the dugong feeding trails in an intertidal seagrass bed. Here is a dugong bottom feeding by excavating and digging up the seagrass, actually in Egypt. You can see that the seagrass biomass is very low, but that dugongs can also eat this sort of seagrass called amphibolus, which is quite bushy. Dugongs eat amphibolus, but they can't dig it up, and they don't leave feeding trails, and because they crop the leaves rather like a turtle does. So the point I want to make here is that just because there are no dugong feeding trails doesn't mean that there are no dugongs. And even in some areas where there is sparse seagrass, if the sediment is very hard, the dugongs will not eat the seagrass, or the below ground seagrass, because they can't dig it up. So then they have to crop. So it is quite complicated, but I do read many papers which assume if there are no dugong feeding trails that the dugongs are not feeding in the area, and that's not necessarily correct. It may be right, but it may not be. I think it's been established for a long time, and work that I did a very long time ago, even before I came to India in 1987, that dugongs have a long, slow life history. And we found out that dugongs can live a very long time by counting growth layers in their tusks, as in this lower right-hand picture, like the growth rings in a tree. we can also see that dugongs can stay with their mums for a really, really long time, several years. They can suckle milk from their mums for at least a couple of years, maybe not always, but even though they start eating usually seagrass within a few days of birth. So we know that, and we've known that for a long time. But I think we are gradually learning that the life history is very, very much affected by the food supply. And when dugongs don't have enough to eat, their rate of population increase is greatly reduced. And so the age of reproduction, first reproduction, can range between 7 and 17 years. The calving interval can slow from 2.5 to 6 years. And the maximum rate of increase, which the modelling has shown is about 5% of a year, can be a lot less than that, even if there isn't human-induced mortality because of problems with the food supply. So having the food supply, the seagrass communities in good condition is really, really important. And that's where we start getting worried about climate change. More about that in a minute. Now, in the mid-1970s, in Torres Strait, it's a bit like Palk Bay in the Gulf of Mannar in a way. It's the site of an old land bridge between that pointy tip of Australia and Papua New Guinea. And Torres Strait is unquestionably what I call the dugong capital of the world. And I think it has been for thousands of years. We now think that there might be 100,000 dugongs in Torres Strait. There is a very significant Indigenous harvest. Australian Indigenous people, Torres Strait Islanders, are allowed to hunt dugongs, and all the evidence shows that harvest is sustainable. It's controversial. It doesn't happen in many places in the world, and nor it should, but it's sustainable. And they have been hunting dugongs sustainably for at least 6,000 years. And they have been hunting at very high levels, we know from middens, for hundreds of years, way before European colonisation. So in the 1970s, there was a huge seagrass dieback. Nobody knows, like there are thousands of square kilometres of seagrass in Torres Strait. A lot of it is in quite deep water. No one knows why that occurred. But what we do know is that there were dugongs being sold in what was called the Daru market, that doesn't happen now, in Papua New Guinea, and that the pregnancy rate for those animals, which I worked on, and they were collected by a person called Bridget Hudson, went to zero. There were no pregnant females coming through the market, and then very low throughout the 70s. And then as the seagrass recovered, the proportion of mature females that was pregnant went up dramatically. So 20 years after this happened, Donna Kwan, who was, some of you would know from the Dugong MOU Secretariat, she led it for many years, she's recently left, she studied this for her PhD. And she aged a large number of animals that were taken in the Indigenous fishery in Australia. And this is the age frequency histogram. The y-axis, the x-axis, is the age class, and the y-axis is the number of dugongs. Now, there aren't that many young animals because they were not targeted by the fishery, but one would expect that this age frequency histogram would have a smooth kind of decline, and there wouldn't be many old animals taken because not many animals live that long. But you can see there's this big gap, and this big gap coincides with the time when there was the seagrass dieback in Torres Strait, and this was still obvious in the age frequency histogram of the dugongs 20 years later, and is an indication of recruitment failure when there wasn't enough for the dugongs to eat. Now, this has happened again and again for different reasons. So in 1992, there were 2 floods and a cyclone in a place called Harvey Bay, which is another really important dugong area. It normally supports a couple of thousand animals. And basically, after this occurred, at least 99 carcasses were recovered. Some were recovered as far south as Sydney, way out of the normal range. Animals went out into the East Australian Current and died, and then were swept down. And the proportion of calves declined from 22% before the floods to only 2% in 1993. And the seagrass went from looking like this to looking like that. There was a huge plume of dirty water, flood water, going out into the bay, and a huge amount of seagrass died. The deeper water seagrass recovered much more quickly than the shallow water seagrass. And there was a flood at the beginning of this year, and it looks like the pattern was rather similar. Probably not as serious as in 1992, but still there were a huge loss of seagrass, particularly the shallow water seagrass, and additional mortality of animals. The full results of this are not yet available. Then in 2010 and 2011, along the Queensland coast where I live, there was a terribly difficult summer. There was huge floods over a very large area, 2 huge cyclones, including a Category 5 storm, and with structural damage to habitats. And it all happened again. So this is a record from the Queensland Stranding Network of what happens when dugongs, the pattern of dugong stranding, and you can see it tends to be very low in there are few numbers, and then it increases in the second half of the year because the animals, the seagrass has a seasonal dieback in about August, September, and the animals starve. And that always happens. But this year, in 2011, the number of animals found dead was much, much higher than any other year after that huge loss of seagrass. And similarly, when we did aerial surveys, we found that many dugongs temporarily emigrated from the coast, and they stopped breeding. So on that aerial survey, we saw no calves. So this is near where I live, and near Townsville, and that dark area means that in that bay there are a lot of dugongs, several hundred, and by after the floods there were very few left. Similarly, further north, another dugong hotspot, very few left. Actually, we know that many of the dugongs died, and you saw that in the graph, but also some migrated out of the area, and they came back when the seagrass recovered. So seagrass loss, postponed breeding, loss of calves, mortality of adults, and temporary emigration out of an area. Extreme storms can also cause surges, which can strand dugongs. I think this is quite a rare event. I believe that Jones reported that after a huge cyclone in Pulp Bay in the 1950s, but we have seen it again in Australia. This one was in 1984. That's a much younger Helene, and there were about 30 dugongs that was stranded on these mud flats. This is a week later. Some of them were still alive because it rained a lot. And they were up to 9 kilometres inland and behind stands of mangroves up to 3 metres tall. It's absolutely extraordinary, the power of those waves. Frightening, actually. So there are legends of this happening before, but that's the only one I know of in my professional career working on dugongs. There has also been habitat loss due to seagrass dieback caused by marine heat waves. Now, this is the risk of this is more at the high latitude limits of the Dugongs range, where the seagrass is not adapted to high temperature. So there have been, and I'm sure you've read about it, a number of marine heat waves that have caused coral loss in the Great Barrier Reef. As far as we know, it hasn't caused seagrass loss, although if the temperature gets warmer with climate change, that would be expected. But this was in Shark Bay at the southern limit of the range on the west coast. And this is a big bay with certainly more than 10,000 dugongs, a lot of dugongs. And a lot of them used to eat this Amphibolus antarctica, and I showed you this photo before because the animals can't dig that up and they have to crop the leaves. So the marine heat wave caused a loss of about 1,000 square kilometres of seagrass, mainly an Amphibolus antarctica. There was Halophila and Halogely in the bay, but they were much less affected. Again, the dugongs stopped breeding. There was only one calf sighted in the aerial survey in 2012. There were no evidence of dugong deaths, but it's a pretty remote area, so they may not have been detected. And there was no evidence of temporary migration out of the bay. However, what happened was that the Amphibolus was replaced by it was reduced to stalks like that, but the area was recolonized very quickly with Halophila and Halogely, which the dugong like. So the seagrass people were distraught at the huge loss of Amphibolus. Actually, in the end, the dugong habitat may have been increased. So that is very complicated. Point I want to make is very complicated. So we know that extreme weather events on dugongs, cyclones and floods, cause increased mortality, temporary emigration between areas, reduced fecundity and juvenile mortality, and they may cause mass stranding. It is complicated and one can't predict a priori what the impact will be from a given event. Now, with climate change, cyclones are expected to get less frequent, which might be good news, but more severe, which is very bad news. Floods you have had extreme floods. The world has had extreme floods in recent years, and some of that is certainly now attributed to climate change. And marine heat waves and the frequency are definitely linked to climate change, and that can cause seagrass death, particularly of seagrasses that are not well adapted to warm water, and definitely reduced dugong fecundity and probably the mortality of dependent calves. So people have modelled the sea temperature increase in the Dugongs range. It is expected, even with a low emissions scenario, that there will be temperature increases and sea temperature increases. I'm sure you've heard about that. And it's predicted that some parts of the Dugong range will be affected more than others. I note that the west coast of India is one of those regions. I know you don't have dugongs right along the west coast, but the west coast is definitely one of those regions. And of course, if there's a high emission scenario by the early which I must say is starting to look increasingly unlikely, I hope, that you can see that there is very significant temperature increase throughout the Dugongs range. If, as the temperature increases, it's projected to lead to the loss of the deeper water seagrass. Now, this is more important in some areas than others, but it's certainly going to be a potential problem for Torres Strait, which I told you earlier, between Northern Australia and Papua New Guinea, and animals move across those country boundaries every day, and because there are a lot of dugongs in this region that are in the deeper water areas of less than 10 metres and down to about 30 to 35 metres. And this is a result of aerial surveys. And so we think that thermal stress is likely to cause the contraction in the depth range of most species, leading to potential habitat loss for dugongs. And that means that the dugongs are going to move more into the inshore, very shallow seagrass meadows, where they're much more susceptible to human disturbance. All the modelling shows that the species composition of seagrass beds will change with seagrass communities will change with climate change. There will be winners and losers species. How that's going to pan out for dugongs is rather uncertain, because dugongs can eat a very wide range of species, but they certainly don't like eating very tough, fibrous species. They don't have their teeth, don't cope with it very well at all. So there's a lot of unknowns there, but I think the news is not encouraging. So what do I think will happen? I think that we can expect, of course, physical environmental changes. Sea temperatures are already increasing. Sea level is already rising in some areas. There are changes in water chemistry. There's an increased intensity, even if there isn't an increased frequency of extreme weather events. And there are already evident major changes in rainfall patterns. I think we can expect changes in our coastal habitats of seagrasses, mangroves and tidal marshes, and the seagrass communities will be the most affected for dugongs, but there are interactions, particularly between seagrasses and mangroves. There will be co-stressors. I can't speak for India, but in Australia there is land clearing, there is infrastructure development, hardening coastlines as a result of sea level rise. There are dams because of being built, which changes the water flow into the coastal waters because of concerns about shortage of fresh water. Harmful algal blooms have not yet been recorded as an impact on dugongs, but they certainly have for Florida manatees. Very, very serious impacts. And of course, climate change is going to result in food insecurity, particularly for fishing communities, and the pressure on dugongs is likely to, as for food, is likely to increase, particularly in very poor areas. So we think there is going to be habitat loss and change. There's going to be changes in community composition and the availability of food. There will be changes in the diving and feeding behaviour. There will be changes in the demography, particularly in reproduction, and there will be changes in movements and habitat connectivity, and there are likely to be increases in mortality in response to extreme weather events. So I conclude that the climate stresses are already affecting the coastal estuarine habitats of dugongs, with consequential changes to their demography, some of which are very serious, their movements and their habitat use. The impacts are going to be locally variable, but can be expected to be widespread. And movements and habitat connectivity will be reduced in some cases, but increased in others. What we have seen in Australia is when seagrass is lost, the temporary emigration of dugongs is increased. And I anticipate there will be increased recruitment failure and mortality. So the news is not good. And I think it's very, very important that everything is done to try and increase the resilience of dugong populations to these changes, especially when possible. And I appreciate it's very difficult to increase to do something about the co-stresses on dugong habitats. And you mentioned the impact of seagrass beds on damage from trawling, things like that. Now I want to reach out to you and ask you for your help. So the last assessment of dugong status and trends was done in 2003. And some of you will be familiar with this document. It was done by UNEP. I was the lead author, but the others helped. And there is a whole chapter on India and Sri Lanka. And the whole thing is hopelessly out of date. So the UNEP MOU Secretariat has decided it needs to be redone. So this is where I am reaching out to you for help. So we know that even though the dugong is rated as vulnerable at a global scale by IUCN, it is very variable how it is. In Japan, it was rated as critically endangered. It may now be extinct. It's thought to be functionally extinct from China. The East African population has recently been listed by IUCN as critically endangered. The New Caledonia population as endangered. The assessment of the situation in Australia looks quite different from this. You can see here that the Gulf of Kutch isn't even registered. So it needs redoing. There is a lot of new information. It needs to be incorporated. So what UNEP is proposing is that I work with local experts to produce a new report. This will be done as a series of chapters. It has to be finished by the end of the year, which is pretty scary because they haven't even signed the contract yet. It's with UNEP at the moment. The technical advisory group from the MOU will act as expert reviewers, and local contributors, and this means you, will have co-authorship of the information for their country. So you would be registered as a co-author for the chapter on India and Sri Lanka, for example. And the new report will be published by UNEP online. So that's what they are trying to achieve by the end of the year. The reason for the end of the year deadline is that the MOU funding isn't confirmed after the end of the year from the United Arab Emirates. But that's just the beginning. Then there's a hope to develop a wiki version of this that the countries themselves can update using the technical advisory group as a quality control. And so we're not going to have the ridiculous situation of something being 20 years out of date the minute this is finished. And then the plan is to link this with the reporting arrangements under the Dugong MOU. So that's the plan. It will happen in 2 stages. The first stage will be a new report, and the second stage will be the development of a wiki version. But in order to do this, I need expert advice from people in countries, and India would be a very important part of that. So what I will want from you is the distribution and abundance of dugongs. I've got copies of some published papers, but obviously there'll be more stuff in reports, distribution and states of seagrass, the threats, and your current conservation measures, noting that you've been doing a lot. And so I need to know who are the key contacts in India, and if you can help me with Sri Lanka, that would be very helpful. And for people who are able to help me, this is my email address. And I suggest that you email the organisers of this workshop, and they will pass that on to me. So I'm very happy to answer your questions. I might leave this up as it is so that anyone who wants to copy that email address can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Helen Marsh, for that beautiful talk. And personally, I have learned so many new things about dugongs in this talk, and I am super proud today. To answer your question on the slide, we have some key contacts in India and Sri Lanka in the panel today. So I hope there will be inputs for the coming up action plan, and everybody will write to you. We
Okay, well,
have
I'll look forward when that contract is signed to being in contact with you all, and then we can get this draft done. It will be so good if India and Sri Lanka could be an exemplar chapter for this book, and really tell the world what you're doing and what you know about the status. And I noticed that we have Anjana here from Thailand, and of course we'll be in contact with you too, Anjana, Thailand, and we have someone from Indonesia as well. And so expect that you'll all be hearing from me when UNEP finally gets around to signing this contract. Thank you.
definitely. So we have a question from one of our panelists, Swapnali Kore. I would like to show that on screen. Is dugong feeding on sea algae is a common thing, or do dugongs prefer this feeding habit only when seagrass resource availability is rare? Because globally, dugong conservation is directly linked with seagrasses all the time.
I don't think it is a common thing, but I think it happens under two circumstances. The first circumstance is when seagrass is lost as a result of an extreme event. And then if algae remains, the dugong will eat algae. And that's been shown a number of times. But there are several papers by a man called Scott Whiting, and he studied dugongs algal covered reef in the Northern Territory in Australia. And that wasn't as a result of an extreme event. It was an algal reef, and they were eating algae, and it seemed like they were doing perfectly fine. Now, green turtles, they're also algal eating and seagrass eating green turtles, and they have different microbiomes in their gut, and whether that can occur in dugongs, Scott's work would suggest it can. The main reason I told you about this is everyone just assumes if there's no seagrass, there are no dugongs, and I think we now know enough to know that that's likely to be true, but it's not always true. And also, there are certainly in Moreton Bay and Shark Bay, which are two very important dugong areas at the high latitude limits to the range in Australia, dugongs have been found targeting invertebrates, particularly in the cold season. How widespread that is, I don't know, but it definitely happens.
Okay, I hope Swapnali that answers your question. We have one more question from Rujinun Palhan, who is from Thailand. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. How far dugongs can migrate from their original habitat to the new habitat in case of original habitat loss?
Well, a dugong, the satellite tracking shows that an individual dugong can move hundreds of kilometres in a few days. Most of the times when they don't all do it, and no one knows why some do it and some don't. Most of the time when it's happened, it hasn't been a case of habitat loss per se. And I guess the unproven hypothesis is that because habitats can be lost due to extreme weather events and other causes, that the mothers teach their calves where there are alternative sources of food. No one knows if that's really true, but there, it's fair to say that there's a lot more data for Florida manatees that suggests that's true, that suggests that Sirenians have very good spatial memories. So we're kind of guessing it for dugongs. If we no satellite tracking has ever occurred immediately after a major seagrass loss because of ethical issues. If the dugongs are in bad shape as a result of the seagrass, we could never get ethics permission, and I think nor should we, to tag dugongs. You know, that's additional stress and a very stressful situation. Dugongs have certainly been found hundreds of kilometres away from where the seagrass was lost, but mostly they've been found when they're dead, and that looks like they've been carried there from currents. But we certainly know that live dugongs can move, up to 500 kilometres to a new habitat and come back. But that hasn't been associated with habitat loss. But we also know that some dugongs stay in an area. Well, I think they all stop breeding. Some stay and starve, and some move and then come back when times are better.
That is very interesting and a new area to study for all of us to
Yeah.
put
Well,
more
would a
inputs into
dugong
this.
go from the Gulf of Kutch to Polk Bay and go? I don't know.
We really don't know about this
No,
yet.
no. And the only way you'd get a clue about that, I suspect, would be from genetics.
Yes.
But would they do it? I don't know. I think the jury is out.
So we will take two more questions as we have to proceed towards the panel. We have one genetics related question by Dr. Anand Pandey. Do you see value in tagging dugongs in India to understand their movement pathways? Genetic evidence points towards mixed populations in recent past.
Okay. Tagging dugongs is very expensive and isn't necessarily cost effective. What we know is you have to tag quite a lot of animals to get an idea of what's going on, because individually they behave very differently. So tagging just a few is probably not going to tell you very much, because they may just hang about and locally, or some may move and some may not. I
Okay,
think
we have.
there are probably more important things for you to do. I also think that if you have a very small population, and all the data that I've seen for the Gulf of Kutch, for example, would suggest the population is very, very small. Catching a dugong to tag it isn't without risk. And under those circumstances, with a very small population, I don't think you can afford to take the risk. That's a personal opinion of mine. I think it would be something that I wouldn't be rushing into at all. I would be sitting down with some experts and discussing it through and deciding whether that was the best investment you could make to know what you need to know about dugongs. And I think having a conversation would be important, but I don't think it's automatically. My instinct would say probably be very cautious before you did that, but I do think it'd be worth having the conversation.
Great. We will take only one more question now by Dipani Sutaria. Hello, Helen. We hypothetically managed to protect dugongs and dugong habitats from direct anthropogenic influences. Is it possible to design, restore seagrass habitats? How soon would a population increase, if at all, if it is starting at 7 to 10 dugongs, like a Gulf of Kutch population?
Hi, Dipani. It's very good to see you. Um, for those that don't know, Dipani was a student of mine, and she
Yes,
and
we
I
know.
now co-supervise an Indian student in Australia. So, well, the first thing is to restore the habitat. There's no point in, I mean, the population is not going to increase until you've done that. Um, People were very anti seagrass restoration, active seagrass restoration, but now I think the seagrass scientists that I know in Australia are now believing that it is important to restore seagrasses. Uh, and it would again depend on the loss and the nature of the loss and whether there was a seed bank or not, etc. I mean, it's not entirely straightforward. There are techniques to do it. The techniques are better developed for the more robust species that dugongs would feed on by cropping than the species that they'd feed on by excavating. There would be a lot of things to think about. So if so, the answer is probably yes, but it would need very, very, very careful planning, and you would need to work out the pluses and minuses before you did it. And how would a population increase if it's starting at 7 to 10 dugongs? Well, dugongs obviously spread over a very, very wide range over a long time. If it started at 7 to 10 dugongs, no one's done that experiment. I don't know. Depends on the genetic diversity, the state of the habitat, etc. I mean, theoretically, a dugong population breeding maximally could double in 15 years. But it would be a slow process. It wouldn't be something because they've got such a long, slow life cycle. It wouldn't be something that happened quickly. And don't ask me about translocating dugongs because I personally think that's very unlikely to happen at all. But I know that
Yeah.
some people think it could be done, but I don't know where you'd get them from for a start, and how would you stop them from swimming away? I don't know. And the biggest thing would be that if you move dugongs from somewhere else, they wouldn't have learned from their mums all the things they needed to learn in a new habitat. So I personally don't think that's a good idea, but some other people might disagree with me.
Thank you so much for answering all of the questions. We have few more questions and we will make sure that the questions reach to you and we can give them answers to this
Okay, thank
because of
you.
yeah, thank you so much. I would like to add Dr. Johnson, uh, who is our supervisor for Campa Dugong team now, and he will be talking about our project and what it has done till now for Indian dugongs and seagrasses. He has been the captain of ship since last 2 years, and we are very fortunate. I am his direct student, and I'm extremely fortunate to have him as my supervisor. So over to you, Dr. Johnson.
So thank you, Chinamya. So first of all, I would like to compliment the entire team for making this wonderful event. So before going to presentation, I'll just share my presentation. Chinamya, can you see our presentation?
Not yet, sir.
Just a minute.
Sure.
Can you see right now?
Yes, please go ahead.
I'll just make it slide view. So okay, so I think most of the they are familiar with our work, and in the interest of the other panelists and some of the other colleagues, those who are watching through YouTube, so I would like to share our program, what work we are doing actually. Can you see it, Chinmaya?
It is buffering. I can see your screen, but it is buffering.
Can you see Chinmaya?
No, it is buffering, sir. Can you?
Hello,
Yeah, now it's visible. Now it's visible.
Chinmaya? Hello,
Sir, hello.
can you see it? Can you see
Yeah,
it?
now, yeah, it's still on the
Can you see the
slide
screen?
mode. Yes, sir.
So okay, so I'll at least now I'll go by slide mode then.
Okay.
So our program is the recovery of dugongs and their habitat in India. So it's not the complete research program. It is a participatory approach with the community. So that is the nature of this program actually. So before going to this program, just I would like to add upon little background about the dugongs and the dugong research in our country. And we everybody know actually. So India has a very small population. We believe that less than 200 individuals left in the Indian regions. Very small population residing at the Gulf of Kutch region. A reasonably good population we have in the Park Bay and the Gulf of Mannar region. And Andaman, of course, we have a good population. In the case of Park Bay and Gulf of Mannar region, still we have a hope because the neighboring area, that is Sri Lankan part, still we have a scope actually. There are potential habitat and the animals might be moving between these two areas. Similarly, from Andaman, the animal may be moving along the Southeast Asian region. So there is a good potential. But the case of Gulf of Kutch, it's a very small population. We need to do the much to recover and improve the habitat in that area actually. The problem is same across all the area, but there are some unique problems are there in a particular region. For example, Gulf of Kutch region, the seagrass meadows are highly degraded actually. Maybe due to the naturally that area is having more turbid nature. Pollution is very common. So the seagrass habitats are highly degraded when compared to the other parts. In the case of Park Bay region, the animals, most of the animals are residing outside the protected area. Which is prone for high fishing pressure. So often the animal get entangled with the fisherman net. So incidental catch is very common in this particular area. In the case of Andaman Nicobar group of islands, the habitat itself fragment actually between the islands. There is a tiny portion of the seagrass meadows. So the habitat fragment is a big challenge for recovering the species in that area. So with this background, everybody know actually any area, if you have a small population, small populations are prone for inbreeding, then genetic loss. Then ultimately small population become converted into like a smaller population. They are highly vulnerable for extinctions. That's what our current position. So we are working with this condition. So to avoid the species extinctions, we are trying to improve the habitat to reduce the threat in the particular area. So the major significant events happened in India way back in 2012. So that time, so we had our government of India. We have signed a MOU with CMS Dugong Secretariat. There are our neighboring partners from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. They were participated. So that's what the significant day, I would say. Actually, that happened May 28th. So that date we picked up as like a Dugong World Dugong Day. So that is the one, the big milestone, I would say. Actually, it happened in Gulf of Mannari area. So followed by, before that, no, everybody know Dugong, but no much attention was paid actually. And then the government of India, they have allotted a small grant to start the understand the status of the population. In fact, Dr. Shivakumar and his students, they have done a extremely nice work. Though it is a citizen science work, through that we could able to come up with a number. That's what we have right now. I still now around 200 individuals left in that area. So then followed by the Ministry of Environment and Forest as part of the CAMPA, the compensatory afforestation program. So this program has been launched, recovery of dugongs and their habitat in India, covering all 3 states. So we are working with the State Forest Department. They are the major partners, along with the other line agency like Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard, and State Marine Police, because most of the areas dugong habitats are governed by the Indian Navy and Coast Guard. So parallelly, we are working with that, and there are many partners, including Central Inland Marine Fisheries Institute, State Fishery Department, local NGOs. They're all a part of our program. So this program has 4 important objectives. One is species conservation and management. Second one is habitat conservation, focusing on the understanding the dugong habitat and then management. Third one is the major important one is mainstreaming the community towards the marine biodiversity conservation, participatory management of dugong and their habitat, and capacity building for the State Forest Department. So these are the 4 important components. With that, we are proceeding, and since 2016 onwards. So what we have done, the first initial stage, we have identified the critical dugong habitat along the dugong range states from Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, as well as the Andaman Nicobar Island. So this is based on the citizen science approach. Data collected from citizen science data, standing record, then direct sighting, board survey. So through that, we could able to nail down the critical dugong habitats where often they are visiting, where they are using that particular habitat. So one of such region is the Park Bay region. So there are 2 important places. Very often we get a good sighting. So in India, we do not have the huge population. We always find an isolated individual. There is no herd movement, except sometimes we get to see 4 or 5 individuals together. Otherwise, always we find a single individual, or either with mother and calf. So that's what we get actually. So based on the frequent sighting, so we have recommended the place in the Park Bay area, North Park Bay area, is a potential the protected area. So the government of Tamil Nadu also captured our recommendation and immediately came forward and declared this one as a Dugong Conservation Reserve. So now a lot of management activities going on, and they are trying to mainstream the community towards the marine biodiversity conservation. So this is one of the important milestone I would like to say. And similarly, the Gulf of Mannar region, though of course it is a protected area, so there are a few places very often we get a good sighting. And Gulf of Kutch region, there are small creeks within the island area. That is a potential area. And before starting our project, normally we get a standing record, or very rarely we get a sighting from the fishermen. But But now we could be able to identify the individual through even drone survey, actually focused drone survey. So still we have a promising population residing in the Gulf of Kutch region. Andaman Nicobar Island, especially the entire North Andaman to South Andaman region, we have very good population. But only thing is that the habitats are very patchy and fragmented. The second important component is understanding the population size. So we always rely on the fisher folks data or citizen science data, but now we started using the unmanned aerial vehicles to identify the individual and come up with the estimation. This again, it is a pilot testing. So we have done several pilot testing in the Pakpe region as well as the Andaman group of island. But there are limitations. So the flight, whatever the quadcopter we are using, we can reach up to 3 kilometers only. So the Parkway region, even we have more than 10-kilometer region, we have a good seagrass meadow actually. So that is a limitation. So even though with that limitation also, we could able to come up with the encounter rate. So for example, recently we have conducted aerial shorty. We could able to cover about 6 square kilometer area. So we could detect 4 individual within that area. With the encounter rate of 0.6 per square kilometer. So again, I mentioned, so our limitation is up to 3 kilometers. So beyond that also there is a potential area, and we couldn't able to extend. Then again, the movement of animal between Sri Lanka and we presume that it often they move from between Sri Lanka to India because very small area. And there is a seasonal movement, there is a seasonal migration and feeding activities happening in that area. That also we need to taken care, and where to we have to sample, then only we can come to the real estimate in that particular area. So even the Gulf of Kutch, right now we can able to detect the species in the area, the individual in the Gulf of Kutch. So that is the good sign. Similarly, the Andaman group of island, especially the particular area called Havelock Island, as well as the Neil Island region, there is a residing population. Even very often the tourists as the divers, they go to see the animal, and even we can identify the individual animal in that particular area. So that is another interesting area. The second important component, mapping the critical habitats. So seagrass habitat management, we need to understand the critical dugong habitat, because we have around 14 species of species. All the 14 species are not preferred by the dugong. There are 4 or 5 species very often we come across in the guts of the standard animal. So especially Halophilia ovalis, Halophilia bakeri, then again Syringonium. So these are the species we very often we come across. So we need to understand the question is, we need to understand why this particular species are seagrass are preferred by the dugong. So we are working on that, and we are trying to find out the nutritional status of this species. So that is another one, so that we can go for restoration, and we can go for the conservation of that particular species. So that is another thing. So as far as genetics is concerned, I think Dr. Anand, he was flagged actually. Luckily, we have very good diversity within the genetic diversity within the Indian dugong population. The diversity estimate says that 0.85. So it's like, we have a cocktail mixture of genes from the south west Indian Ocean, as well as the northwest, even the southeast gene actually. So even overall, if you see the genetic nature, which is more similar towards the northwest Indian Ocean population, that means very close to the Middle East region. So we have more similarity when compared to the south and southeast Asian regions. So that's what our finding. So genetically, we have a mixed population, even though that population is standing out unique from the entire overall dugong population. The second important aspect of the habitat conservation. So we are also assessing the threat within the critical dugong habitat. How many boats, how many fishermen are accessing that area, and what are the other threats or perceived threats are there. especially the polythene waste, discarded nets. So based on that, we have prepared a matrix, and the threat status also we have assessed. So this will directly flow into the local managers. So they will intervene, and they have to do management, better management of the seagrass habitat. So these are two important research component. Then third important component, the participatory management. So we have been continuously providing a lot of awareness program for the local fishermen community, not only fishermen community, other stakeholders, fishery department, to mainstream them towards the marine biodiversity conservation. So far, we have reached out more than 75,000 people across the Dugong range states, mostly youth, children's, and they often every month, they were engaged in the different activities related to the environment, conservation of the marine program, beach cleaning activity, so and so more than 100 people so far registered as Dugong volunteers. And wherever we get a good platform, whether it is a social event or any festival, so we tap that event, and we reach out the community through some street performance to educate, provide awareness towards the Dugong conservation program. And so far, more than 100,000 the volunteers they registered. So we have WhatsApp network group, and they communicate, they provide information about the all kind of activities, including the sighting as well as the illegal activities. The managers, the field manager also part of that program. So immediately our team, the field managers, all other partners, Dugong volunteers, they will pitch in that particular area, and we try to solve the issue, including rescuing the animals. And we always, through this WhatsApp network, so we get a lot of citizen science information, especially Andaman group of islands. We get even individual ID photographs for the understanding the movement of animal between the islands. So that kind of information. And one of the important strong the program, outreach program, is Dugong scholarship program. So we started awarding the school going children's from the 9th standard to 10th standards. We pick up the fishermen kids, and we support them monthly 500 rupees. The scholarship we will provide, this money will be used for their higher study. So through these children, and we will be reaching the fishermen community. So they are their ambassadors. So they go back and they communicate with the parents about the animal as well as the other marine creatures. Actually, it's a very successful program, and so far 5 such the scholarship has been granted, and more than 1,000 students were enrolled in this program. Actually, it's a competitive process within the schools. We conduct an exam, and we picked up really weaker the students, and we support through this program. And because of these all activities, earlier there are many times people, they get the entangled animal, and they never they do not know how to recover, and because they believe that it's like a fish. Actually, even they keep the animal, even it is stranded, they keep the animal inside the water. They do not know they come out for surfacing. Actually, so continues the awareness program. Now so far 18 Dugongs has been successfully released back to the incidental catch. Even they are ready to sacrifice their net, and the government of State Forest Department, as well as we from the Wildlife Institute of India, through the CAMBA program, we are conducting felicitation program, and some incentive also we are providing through this program. So that is actually really working well. And through this our volunteer network, so we are getting that information. So they are now much aware about the animal, ready to sacrifice their livelihood for the animal. Then final one is the capacity building program. So the forest officer, the frontline staff, so they are basically trained with the forestry actually, and they will be posted in the coastal area, and the coastal area is totally different for them actually. So we need to provide basic understanding, basic skills for managing the marine habitat. So there are several programs we are conducting, including scuba diving for the marine ranges actually. And so for 16 frontline staffs we have trained, and the IFS officers, so they come for training to Wildlife Institute of India. So we have 1 week special program for them for managing the coastal and marine biodiversity. So far there are many the frontline staff as well as the officers were trained actually, but the staff, the forest staffs are dynamic in their posting actually. They keep on change from one place to another place. So we have to continuously engage them, continuously provide the capacity building program for effective management of the marine protected area. So we have produced several manuals, especially for the community as well as the field staff, to identify the different types of animals, the wildlife around their habitat. That is also one of the way to reach out the community. So moving to the way forward, the one of the important challenges, the response to the stranding animal actually. So whenever the live stranding happen, so how to respond? So we are looking for to we are no planning to establish a mobile marine rescue facilities actually in the all Duong state actually. In Andaman we are a little ahead actually. We have recently hand over a rescue boat with all other equipment. So wherever the standing up is, quickly they move and they can involve in the rescue facilities. Similarly, we are planning the rescue team facilities, a mobile rescue facility at the Gulf of Mannar as well as the Gulf of Kutch. And capacity building program also needs to be continue because I already mentioned the staff field staffs are dynamics, and standardizing population techniques is another important aspect. We have been trying and we will improve and we will try to come up with a real estimation of animal and awareness program. So continuous awareness program, outreach program we have been doing. So we need to continuously engage the community. The moment if you slow down the engagement, then again the problem will again aggravate. So now so far the all three states, people are aware, people are very much aware about the dugong and the associated fauna. So they are ready to support and conserve these animals. That is a great success story. And I already mentioned we are working with the different partners, different stakeholders in the national level as well as the regional level, including CMS Dugong MOU. And this is our Dugong team right now. So they are the real heroes in the field, and they have been working day and night in the field to conserve this animal. With this, I conclude my the brief. If any question, I am ready to answer, or maybe at the end of the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Johnson sir, for that briefing of our project. So far, we haven't had questions, but we had a comment from Kannan Natarajan. Very encouraging information, Mr. Johnson. Keep going the fantastic work, proof of conservation effort. So, if there are any questions, we will make sure that questions reach to you and we will provide the answers to the audience
Thank you,
through.
Kannan sir. Thank you for your nice words.
We will move forward to our panel discussion. I would like to invite uh, Dr. Professor Shiv Kumar, who is our own Shiva sir, scientist, former scientist G in Wildlife Institute of India, and now a professor in Pondicherry University. He is a world-renowned name for marine mammal research, as he is a member of immense international bodies, including World Commission on Protected Area, IUCN groups, specialist groups on galliforms, invasive species, marine mammals, freshwater species. He is also part of important marine mammal areas of India and a member of advisory group for CBD, which is a huge contribution. And he is the perfect moderator for today's panel discussion. Over to you, Shiva sir.
Thank you very much, Inmia. I wish you all very best. In fact, we supposed to end our panel discussion now, but we are starting it. But it is good actually because we could hear the excellent words from the Helen as well as Dr. Johnson, who briefly talked about the conservation efforts of India. Good morning, everybody. So once again, very happy Dugong Day, and we are actually going to discuss about the how to improve our strengthen the conservation of dugong in South and Southeast Asia of the world. That is the plan now. And we have a wonderful panelist to discuss about that. Already we listened to Dr. Helene Marsh, who served a long on the Dugongs. And of course, she mentioned that in 1987 she visited. I heard about that one international workshop that took place in southern part of our country when she was attended that meeting. And not only that, since then she was so impressed with the wonderful life of India, means marine life. She continued her work. And of course, she mentioned about Dr. Dibani. She was one of our excellent marine biologists. We have it in our country, her own student. So she will be one of our panel members. So welcome Dr. Helen for this panel discussion. And then we have another person, the very young, dynamic, and enthusiastic conservation biologist, Dr. Balaji. He is actually from India, the southern part of our country. He founded a South Society, that the non-governmental organization is primarily known as Omkar Foundation. This Omkar Foundation basically worked with the community to uplift their livelihood by doing through research and management. So he's having so many awards. The one of the important awards which is called that IUCN Youth Award. That is something special. That was given to him because of his good work he has been doing it. Of course, he got several other international and national awards. So welcome Dr. Balaji for this panel discussion. And then we have another wonderful panel member, Dr. Anil. He is our neighbor from Sri Lanka. And Dr. Anil actually a mammalogist. He works whether it's a land mammal or in aquatic mammal, doesn't matter for him because he loves mammal. And not only a mammal, it's a true wildlife biologist, I can say. In fact, he do research on spiders. In fact, I think he has a book written on spiders, actually. That's a very down-to-earth personality with respect to wildlife in Sri Lanka. And he founded a NGO recently, and that is the NGO is now taking care. It's called Biodiversity Education and Research, popularly known as the BEAR. So welcome, Dr. Renil. And then we have another very interesting member from Indonesia, Dr. Akbar. He's also having a civil society, non-governmental organization. That society is largely work with uplifting the socio-economic situation of the local communities who are working in the region and through research. That's something because all the panel members are having a very strong research background. That's something good. His NGO is called Habica. It is you can just Google it. You come to know the lot about this particular organization. Of course, Dr. Akbar also do a lot of works on the marine ecosystem, marine mammal, and he has a lot of transdisciplinary works in that Indonesia. Welcome, Dr. Akbar, for this panel discussion. And then Dr. Anchana Batra. So we know her. She's an associate professor in the Prince of Samke University. And I heard a lot about her. Of course, we never had an opportunity to meet. But her work largely on the seagrasses, because seagrass, as all of us know, that the importance of seagrass and their linkage with the livelihood of the community. And then she uses the dugong as the indicator, and she will be sharing a lot about her work during this panel discussion. And then finally, again, coming back to India, Miss Swapnali Kole, and she's the one of the founder member of the team that Dr. Johnson just now presented. The wonderful work contributed by an excellent team that is shown in the picture. And Mr. Swapnali played a critical role in this particular program. In the last 7 years, she's worked with the community, and she largely not only believe on the good science and also believe on the working with the community. And she will be talking or discussing some her experience with us. So with this wonderful panelist, and we have a really shortage of time, so I request all of you to be brief, and we can limit all the discussion in a 5 minutes time. I think Dr. Helene disappeared. Chinmaya, could you bring it her back? I'm not seeing her.
I am trying to contact her, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no issue. So we will actually, when you talk about the dugong conservation or a seagrass, means that their habitat seagrass, although Dr. Helen mentioned that dugongs not only depend on the seagrass, it also feed on the sea algae or a seaweed or invertebrate. But the seagrass to be believed to be the something which we cannot disconnect from the dugong conservation. And this is the community, when you work for the seagrass, is not only accommodating our dugong, it is also livelihood for thousands of people who are living in that area. So we know in Indian situation, fisheries is the most important issues when you come into the conservation of the dugong. And again, yes, Helen joined again. And this community, how to work with the community, all those things we will, before asking these questions to Dr. Balaji. Now I switch over to Helen. Helen, could you tell us something that how South Asia and Southeast Asia important for the global conservation of dugong and their habitats? What is the significant? What are the major things? Because you mentioned that when you wrote the first book and when you developed the conservation action plan for dugong, the global plan action plan, there are a lot of data gaps in this region, South Asia and Southeast Asia. But now there are many research took place between your previous book and now the recent book we are working on right now. A lot of data was collected, a lot of works have been taken place. In that context, how do you see that the contribution of South Asia and the Southeast Asian dugong to the global conservation efforts?
Okay, well, firstly, I would very much like to congratulate India on the wonderful things that you are doing, and I really look forward to that all being pulled together in the updated action plan. So let's think about the importance of the region in a global context. It's a very large proportion of the range of the dugong, with many countries in the region. I also think that it's very important because I think the situation in Southeast Asia is much more typical of the problems that dugongs face in most of their range than, say, the situation in Australia. There are two big reasons for this. I suspect that for the last at least 6,000 years, the habitat available in Australia is much greater than anywhere else because of the shape of the continental shelf and the region available for the growth of seagrass. That is very different from anywhere else that I know of, and I think it's probably very different from anywhere. So the geography is really different, the bathymetry, and of course the human population density. So although I think we've learnt a lot of basic biological facts about dugong from Australia, which is good, I think that actually the management solutions that are appropriate in Australia are not going to be appropriate for much of the rest of the range. So the whole South Asian situation is much, much more, I'm going to say, globally relevant. And that's why I think that the work that is done in this region is going to be more applicable to, in terms of finding management solutions, is going to be much more applicable to a lot of the rest of the dugong's range. So I would see that as very, very important. It's a very large proportion of the range, but it's also a proportion that is globally very significant and from which we can learn a lot.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Helen. So this is a continuing your one more questions. I'm getting it from your answer. That is, I remember your extensive study based on your long studies. You talked about the legal intake of dugong population. What would be the ideal size? How much percentage? You come up with the thing about 10% of the population may be harvested, provided the population is big enough. if the population size is 100 or less than 100, you should not even take one individual. I remember correctly. That was the discussion we talked about almost 13, 14 years before one of our representation in the first signatory meeting of Dugong MAU. So in that background, a majority of our population in South Asia as well as in Southeast Asia are less than 100 individual. At any population, if you take it, whether it is for India, for example, the Pakpe seems to be having the largest population. Still, we are wondering that the population may not be 100 more than 100 individual. So in that situation, what is the way forward for us to make sure that there should not be any mortality on the adult dugong? So we know there are so many issues, boating, boat height, and somehow we reduce the illegal intake of dugong in India. That is the last 7 years, one of the milestone in this dugong recovery program, which brought down the poaching incidents in the country drastically. But apart from that, is there anything which you want to advise this region to make sure that we can prevent the adult mortality?
Well, I mean, I suspect the solutions to human-induced mortality will depend on local people. So actually getting the local people on side, and I was very impressed with all the work you are doing about increasing awareness. And I think that is incredibly important work. I think that top-down conservation very rarely works, and getting the locals on side is really critical. And how you, I guess the right way to do that will probably be vary with local customs and other pressures, but actually, you know, I think the effort to do that and to work with local people is absolutely critical to dugong conservation. And I think it's going to be even more critical with climate change, because I think climate change is going to have adverse effects on dugongs that we can't do much about. So we have to do things that we can do things about, and getting the local people to understand the problem and come up with solutions, I think, is very important.
So thank you, Helen. When you talk about the getting the with the support of the local community, whether it is preventing or reducing the mortality on dugong, or mitigating the climate change related impacts in the seashore area, especially the dugong habitat. For that non-governmental organizations are doing a lot of good job. And one of the non-NGO, that is a civil society placed in the cockpit, it is actually founded by Dr. Balaji. So Dr. Balaji, could you share with us how do you actually working with the community, and what are the roles that the civil society can play in helping the conservation of dugong in any countries, especially in South and Southeast Asia? You have to unmute.
I would like to thank you very much, sir, for this
Oh,
wonderful
sorry,
opportunity.
it's fine.
I would like to share few photos that's to reflect the feed conditions. And
Sure.
yes, sir.
I'm sorry, you were speaking to Dr.
Balaji. Yes,
Balaji.
that's
Yes, it was a little hard for me to understand, and I apologize for intervening.
no issue.
I think I couldn't share the presentation, so I would like to directly
Okay,
share
sure.
my views.
Okay.
So the main thing I found with my perspective in Parkway is the success of long-term conservation of dugong depends directly on the participation of local community, and this has been reflected in the past decades, particularly in the North and Central Parkway, where we have been working with the Fishermen Society, and particularly they prefer to be a part of conservation effort, whatever they want. But the basic knowledge about how to release the dugong and rescue the dugongs was lacking like 10 years before. With the participation of, with the involvement of Forest Department, WII, since 2016, this situation has been gradually improved. So rescue and release of dugongs have been frequently observed in our area. We actually, I can say that the direct approach we need is building direct communication. I mean, the connection between the dugongs and mean and the fisher folks through sharing the sad stories of dugongs, that the low number of dugongs that are existing in our area. So it is possible not only by awareness or any large number of community related programs. It is based on how can we support the livelihood of local community who are going to the sea every day. For example, a marginal fishermen living in Parkway who are doing sustainable fishing methods without affecting the seagrass beds are very important, and they can easily inform. And they are all now part of Dugong Friends of Dugong or Dugong Conservation Groups, which is set up by Tamil Nadu Forest Department as well as with the WII. So these people are playing a key role in rescue and release of dugongs. So I would suggest we have to improve the livelihood today as a dugong conservation day, special day. Today evening, district forest officer is felicitating program to appreciate the fishermen to giving rewards. At the same time, four boats that are wooden boats, rowing boats, are being donated to the fishermen. So it shows that this livelihood eco-friendly boats that doesn't harm without engine are very important, not only for the fishermen but also for the dugongs. So what I would like to move forward is we need more such approach to connect the people with the dugongs emotionally. At the same time, we need more support from the fishermen, which is possible only through livelihood. And we also in a situation that there will be more cyclones, frequency and intensity of the cyclones will increase in the forthcoming years according to IPCC report. What I would like to propose is we need to see the needs of community in case of any disaster, because if the disaster comes to Parkway, the seagrass beds will be damaged, the fisherman livelihood damaged, the dugong will be affected. So there is a connection between a disaster, seagrass, dugongs, and the people. See, we need to approach in case of any disaster or after the disaster cyclone, and what should we do as a conservationist, as a participatory conservationist? What is our role? How we can support the community with the government? So our role is to connect the government, community through local NGOs like us. So I feel this is the most important approach from my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Balaji. It's really interesting to know that the NGO or a civil society can playing a crucial role. So connecting link between the government and the community. Amazing. So I think that could be the reason why you are so successful in that region. And we heard a lot about your organization and yourself, so helping the community. And with the help of the community, you are actually helping the Dugong. So we thank you very much, Dr. Balaji. So we are just moving from the Parkway from Indian side to the Sri Lankan side. Dr. Ranil with us. Ranil, could you update us the current conservation efforts or measures ongoing in the Sri Lanka with respect to dugong and the seagrass? And then what is the significance of the importance of the transboundary cooperation? What kind of cooperation can strengthen the conservation measures of dugong in Parkway as well as Gulf of Mannar region?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. First, I'll give you a brief on Sri Lanka because basically what information we do have from Sri Lanka was based on historical evidence and historical records. Because sadly, from 1980 till 2009, we had an internal conflict. So the Dugong hotspots, like the northwestern and the northern part of Sri Lanka, basically was inaccessible to researchers and scientists such as myself. So after whatever information we have, apart from a sporadic few studies that were done during the ceasefire agreements. So whatever information we have and efforts we have been doing is from 2010 onwards. So what we have been doing is we've been collating information and identifying Dugong hotspots within the Gulf of Mannar and the Pog Bay. And we have been conducting, because Sri Lanka was also part of the Dugong and seagrass conservation project. So that was ineffective, and we had since we had funding, we were able to do a lot of work through that project. So we identified the Dugong hotspots, and through that, and also the areas that we have extensive seagrass beds. So through that, to what we took as a concern in the species, we conduct a lot of awareness programs within those village communities, and we also had a questionnaire service. So through that, we understood that there are certain villages within that area that purely focus on dugong hunting, because the dugong meat in those areas are still sold in openly in the markets, and it fetches a very very high price. So we realized that awareness programs is the best to sort of change the mindset of people. So we brought in alternative livelihoods, where we introduced nature-based tourism concepts, where identifying the value of a live dugong opposed to a dead dugong, and the long term in that, whereas selling the meat is in the short term, whereas protecting the species in the long term. And also we have a lot of, we've been mapping all the seagrass beds in within that area, and identifying the hotspots which we have. I have a map, but I'm sorry, I think I'm unable to share it at the moment. But that map basically has all the areas within the Gulf of Mannar and Pog Bay. So we have also identified villages within different communities, and we have deployed them as dugong protectors. So they basically collect data for us, and they inform us of if a dugong is killed, or if a dugong basically is caught in a fishing net or is a victim of bycatch, and they inform us. And what we have been seeing so far is very sad, because at least one dugong is basically killed in those areas on a monthly basis, and the meat sold in the open market. So now what we're trying to do is move in and identify these areas again, and sort of give them better solutions to rather than quick money, because till 2019 everything was running smoothly, and our project was very very successful. But then subsequently, due to COVID, we lost 2 years of going into those areas, and then the people in those areas also were poverty stricken, so they were basically resolved to any sort of method to earn an income. So we have, and also the Department of Wildlife Conservation, and we have been doing a lot of work where we have, in fact, formed a marine unit specially for not. It was specially formed for dugong protection and policing, but subsequently that under that marine unit, the marine mammals and other marine resources come under their purview as well. So we've been working very very hard towards. Dugong conservation by the main component that we've been using is awareness. And as you mentioned, Professor, when it comes to India and Sri Lanka, through our field research, we have seen dugongs moving to Indian waters from Sri Lankan waters. So the transboundary mechanism should be in effect in a big way, and the two nations should create a synergy where the research from that side and all the law enforcement agencies also can get involved in protecting these species, and subsequently the seagrass beds that these animals depend on, because they are also nursery grounds for myriad of different marine organisms. So we've been working very very tirelessly to that, and in fact, just last week also, two dugongs were killed by fisher, and the meat was sold in the open market. So we have to really come up with a sort of a very effective law enforcement component as well to apprehend the culprits, or in fact even give them incentive base. If they release the dugong, or if they where they will get some monetary gain from that, and I think that will be successful for Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. In fact, this is the message which I can get it from you. The one important message: we have to work with the community continuously. There should not be any kind of break. That is something I'm also afraid in India, because this is the national program. It is a time-bound program initially given to us for 5 years. Now we are extended to another 3 years. We'll continue one more year. My worry is whether this program will be continuing or not. Although there is some kind of a signal from the government of India that the national program will continue, But if we don't continue, any kind of a disconnection with the community will bring them back. They may go for again doing such kind of any illegal activity, which is we are witnessing in Sri Lanka during the COVID period. This is a great lesson. I think this is a lesson for all of us when you are working with, because poor fishermen in both South and Southeast Asian regions are marginalized. They are not a rich people. A majority of them are poor, and they look at Dugong as a livelihood. So we have to continuously working with them. So that's a good thing. And of course, I agree with you that the dialogue with both India and Sri Lankan official is very, very important to take care of the species, because we too believe that the Dugong is moving between these two countries, because that is what the traditional ecological knowledge of fishermen who live in a park bay was talking to us. So it's clear. Of course, we can't go for a satellite tracking, but it required I may go at last as a last resort to prove this evidence. But so far, whatever based on this traditional knowledge, we come to know. So I hope that both the countries initiate this dialogue using the Dugong MAU as a platform and do that. And now we move towards to know some about the Indonesians' experience. Dr. Akbar, could you update us what is the situation of the current situation of the dugong and the seagrass conservation in Indonesia, and what kind of challenges are you are facing it, and what kind of way forward you are putting for to make sure that the dugong and their habitats are secured in future in Indonesia? Over to Dr. Akbar.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. I hope everybody can hear my voice well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I would like to use this opportunity also to say hello to Professor Helene Marsh. We actually met like 2 years ago before COVID in Indonesia. We are in the same project, IKI, UNEP, Seagrass Ecosystem Services. So it's very happy to see you here again, and also with everybody here. Indonesia. So just to give you a context, that it's a country with 17,000 islands. So it's big. So geographically, it's already posed a big challenge for dugong conservation and also seagrass conservation. And I have to admit that the our detection capacity to seagrass and dugong is quite low to cover the entire country. But thankfully, during like the past 5 years, past 10 or 5 years, we have two projects that continuing in Indonesia at the moment that focus on dugong and seagrass. So we use this opportunity with additional resources and network of knowledge exchanges between countries, including the STP that being mentioned by our Sri Lankan fellow project. We able to identify hotspots of dugong population in Indonesia. So that's a major breakthrough for Indonesia. So island like Professor Helene also mentioned about the situation in Singapore. We also have the survey, the similar survey in the other side of the Singapore to adjacent to Indonesia, and hopefully we would have updates on dugong situation also in that islands. So yeah, our detection is improving these past years. Now we already able to detect hotspots. So at least like 6 provinces has been proven to have population, and now I think we need to do more in those area to understand the trend of the population and the what kind of conservation measure need to be done there. So I think some kind of longitudinal survey on those hotspots that being proven supporting significant number of dugong population is very important in those areas. And also we would like to have opportunity to expand the detection to other areas of Indonesia. I would like to take example like the island of Sumatra, which is relatively nearby to Nicobar, Andaman, and and the Thailand side and Malaysia side is the data is very limited there. So those kind of areas we are looking at the increasing the opportunity of having surveys of both of the seagrass and also the dugong itself. And yeah, in terms of the international network, we are not yet the signatory states for the CMS for Dugong MOU, but we are working hard on that. We are focusing on this year to work with the national government and look for exploring the opportunity to bring Indonesia to the CMS Dugong MOU signatory states. So that if that happened, that would be a very important milestone for Indonesia in terms of dugong conservation. And yeah, you also mentioned that in India you have big challenges in terms of small scale fisheries. We Indonesia also have a bit similar challenge. At least 10 million people making livelihood out of the small scale fisheries, and often that also overlap with dugong habitat. So that's another thing that we need to yeah, look forward to work with. And I think the other thing that need to be done and we are focusing at is updating our national dugong conservation plan, which is also end this year, and we are looking forward to have the new one. That I personally have a lot of inputs during this discussion, including the climate change that really something that we need to look at because we also have similar impacts. For example, when we have El Nino coming, so we always look, we are always looking at the Great Barrier Reefs. When something happened there, then we get prepared. So, something like that. So I think working transboundary is really important in this aspect also. So and that's another part that I'm thinking that should be something to be strengthened in the future. So I think that's from me, Professor
Okay.
Sivakumar.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Akbar. In fact, it's really heartening to know that the Indonesia are developing the national action plan for Dugong. In fact, India did it in 2015 itself. That's thanks to the government of India. After attending the first signatory meeting, so then immediately they constituted a task force, and the task force was given a responsibility of developing action plan. In fact, we were very closely working with the Dugong MAU secretariat, and we developed that. And Dr. H.S. Das was immense helps to us. And then the main framework we taken from the framework developed by Dr. Helene Marsh. Actually, in that time there was a global conservation plan was developed. So we stick to that template, and we adapted the template for suiting it to the Indian situation. But it is the right time for India also to revisit that conservation action plan, actually, because that was prepared almost 9-10 years before. So thank you, Dr. Akbar, for updating us about the Indonesian situation. That's another interesting country in the recent past, last 5-6 years, talking about Dugong a very intensively. That is the Thailand. So we have a Dr. Anchana, that associate professor from that. She has been working with the seagrass because she do a lot of research in seagrass, especially its ecosystem services, and its link with the livelihood of the community. So I would like to, we'll be very much interested to know about your experience working with seagrass and its linkage with the livelihood, and how you are promoting or strengthening these linkages to help the conservation of dugong in Thailand. Over to Dr. Archana.
Thank you, Professor. It's a great honor actually to be here. I like to share my view as a seagrass ecologist because we have been working intensively in seagrass, and we understand that seagrass is quite important in terms of ecosystem service. That's one part that I like to really talk about. But luckily, actually in Thailand, people have a great awareness already about the dugong. So we have two very significant, important things ongoing. And the local, especially in Trang province, where the Dugong is the big home over there. And actually, it is my hometown also. So everything is seem like fall into places that we should be able to kind of having all the expert, either seagrass or dugong, and with the conservation mindset of the local people, we supposed to be able to achieve what we try to do. So going back in terms of drunk, at the moment, no doubt the awareness is there, especially in the term of Mariam incidents 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So Dugong become a big impact and rising awareness. So that's a great opportunity. The thing is how we follow from there. That's a big gap. Maybe we miss opportunity. But with this kind of event, the World Dugong Day, maybe we kind of be able to put that spotlight back into Trang, into Thailand, and try to make that as a probably an area base or a platform for us to really study or strengthening what we are already having in Trang in Thailand. So back to what we have also ongoing. Since the Mariam incident, since the seagrass is being kind of known more and more, people kind of spot dugong elsewhere. Not even only in Trang, we go up to the north, upper part of the Andaman coast. We go even the Gulf of Thailand, where nobody ever talked about dugong before. So I think the awareness is there. So that's a good news. Also, together with the drone technology, it's become common, easily accessed, easily used. So all the local, all the NGO, or the government can really deploy that kind of technology to really have a good survey of what actually ongoing with the seagrass trail and the dugong feeding ground. The thing is how we going to have it, analyze it, make it as a good networking. And then with that, we would have a good understanding of our dugong population. So I think we have a great opportunity in terms of seagrass ecosystem service, the technology, the awareness. We have to put all this awareness, the science, and make it into a good use of conservation measure, which I think probably I as an academic might be a little bit kind of lag behind in terms of putting science into the policy. I work closely with the government sector because I myself come from the university, so that could be a missing link in my point of view. But I think everything is there. So with this opportunity, with this Dugong Day and all these panelists, I think if we work together as a network, we will achieve what we like to do. So that's I like to share for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anchana. In fact, this is what the very objective of this entire program. So, as Dr. Helene mentioned in her talk also, that we have to work together to really bring back this dugong and their habitat in the world collectively. And as she already invited all of us to contribute her current book that is talking about the current status of dugong and their habitat and then action plan. So we are all going to work together and do that. And of course, that is the lesson we getting from the affection that people of Thailand shown to the dugong calf. That was something the world over everybody appreciated. So such kind of affections we have to create. That's awareness is a very key. And India also had such a feelings actually. In fact, when we started this dugong recovery program, we had a lot of challenges actually. The one of the important challenge we had is the not much data, scientific data, which I think all of us know aware of that. So in India, we had a lot of lacking of data, and then without data, we cannot go further ahead actually, because unless until we know the situation properly, we cannot rectify the situation. Okay, that was the thing. But now India could reach majority of almost 100,000 people were actually personally connected with this Dugong recovery program. 100,000 people minimum actually, but that took almost 7 years. So now I would like to request Swapnali to share, because she was taken a lead to do some conservation program, the Dugong Recovery Program, in a remote part of our country, that is Andaman Nicobar Islands. It's very difficult to work in such islands. And she's initiated from a scrap, I can say. But finally, now everybody in Andaman knows about Swapnali actually. It is not only the community, and also anybody working as a teacher, students, Coast Guard, Navy, Marine Police, Fisheries Officer, of our important main stakeholder, forest officers. So everybody knows about Swapnali. So Swapnali, could you share with that? How do you change it? How did you turn these changes, no, making changes in Andaman?
Thank you so much, sir. First of all, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, my greetings to all the co-panelists. Today I'm going to talk about very briefly about the citizen science program called the Dugong Monitoring Program, which we have started in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The inception of that started with like how normal marine researchers would go and talk to the local fisher communities because they have this immense knowledge about the sea, and then there are private stakeholders always. And in 2016, I clearly remember that there were a couple of fishermen who would give us dugong sightings because, the problem I would like to brief through the key problems to work in the seascapes in the islands. Number one is the geographical expanse. The entire coastline of Andaman and Nicobar Islands is around 1962 kilometers. And the archipelago has around 836 islands, out of which only 25 to 30 islands are inhabited, which have like settlements. Rest of the islands are geographically isolated anyways. So in that kind of a linear setup where the geographical isolation is so immense, doing boat based surveys becomes difficult. And in addition to that, again, there are certain areas which are tribal restricted areas for the protection of indigenous communities over there, or there are defense prohibited regions where as civilians we cannot enter. So there were many issues which we faced initially. And to start with any kind of research or conservation program, we need to have a baseline on where dugongs are found in the islands. So these regions were always a data gap because our entries were not possible in those areas. So slowly with time, apart from local fishermen, also what we started doing is started a monitoring program where seafaring stakeholders were invited to join. So the only mandate which was needed to be a part of Dugong monitoring program was you need to be a regular seafarer. And we had many regular seafarers in the islands because it's a completely insular setup. So we started with the local fishermen and of course the forest department frontline staff, which is a pivotal force in the islands, because they also go to remote areas for patrolling against, for poachers or coastal security. Then with time we involved marine police, and for the first time we involved Indian Navy and Indian Coast Guard, the defense bodies who go out for patrolling and throughout the length of the islands. So, and then we finally targeted the lifeguards, the tourism industry, the stakeholders like scuba divers for giving us underwater footages. And I have personally seen this network growing from a couple of fishermen in 2016 to at this point we have around 170 active informants and more than 500 dugong sightings. And not just that, so the first idea of starting an informant network was to know about dugong sightings and which areas dugongs are found in. So we definitely have the key hotspots of dugong occurrence in the islands and updated database of more than 500 sightings. But very recently, since last 2 to 3 years, we have photo validated images of dugongs aggregating in the islands. So we have photo documentation of a herd of say 8 dugongs or 13 dugongs. And in my personal experience, when we have spoken with the senior fishermen, they have said that the herds or aggregations of dugongs were happening in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands only 30 to 40 decades back. And then now people have stopped seeing it. And then 3 to 4 years back, even through our fishermen, we always got this information that, we saw a herd of dugong or an aggregation of dugong, but we never had a picture of that. The photo documentation was done only by the Indian Navy and Indian Coast Guard because they fly over the islands for aerial sorties, and they are our only stakeholder agencies who fly. So, given the fact that India is a developing country and we still don't have methods like developed countries using aerial surveys to do study dugongs, we are still relying on boats to do boat-based dugong surveys. This was an added bonus to our work because we were targeting agencies who already fly. So they don't have to drift from their primary mandate of, they're performing their normal functions when they're out in the sea. But if in case when they happen to have an opportunistic sighting of dugongs, they can just report those sightings back to us, and we would urge them to click pictures and photo documentation, because whenever we break the some news like we have 500 dugong sightings, the first question is that a validated database? So we need pictures to even show to people that okay, what our informants are seeing are dugongs and they are not dolphins or whales. So there are a couple of brief things which I would say on uh, how beautifully the citizen science network has worked in our favor. Number one, it has immensely helped us to sensitize people, because when we started off, people were more than 50% of the target audience was unaware of what a dugong is. So they did not know that there is a marine mammal called dugong found in their neighboring waters. They always thought that maybe, when we would splash a picture of dugong on the screen, they were confused on whether there is a dugong or it's a different kind of whale, I think. So we started with sensitizing people from that kind of grassroots level efforts. And the same people are now reporting dugong sightings to us with photo validation. So now, and every sensitization program which we do, depending on which stakeholders we have targeted, we do a brief awareness talk about what dugongs are, how to identify them, how they are different from dolphins and whales and other marine mammals, and how they can contribute to the citizen science program. And I think that is the first step towards a community based conservation, because now I'm confident after 7 years to say that we do have a very robust network in the islands, and where people want to contribute back to dugong conservation. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Swapnali. We nicely put it down. So, what I can, in a conclusion, this is what I believe that uh, South Asia as well as in Southeast Asia regions, I think we have a lot of positive energy or coming from the field. I think we have identified all the Dugong hotspots in this region right now, and also the problems have been identified. And already some of the regions we have action plans. Some of the region the action plans getting developed. That is really a good news from these regions. And as Helen mentioned, that this population, South and Southeast Asian Dugong population, has a global significance. So when we conserve this population, it is very, very important for the global conservation of the Dugong. And then the key, you mentioned that awareness, working with the community, working with the stakeholders. This is amazing. Apart from the research, whatever we are building a research can be doing the technology which we have it. Otherwise, also we can do research with the help of the citizens. That is another experience we are getting it from our region. So with this information, so we conclude this panel discussion because we are really running shortage of time. And I thank all of you for kindly sharing your views and be part of our panel discussion. Thank you very much. Once again, we wish you all a very happy Dugong Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all co-panelists again, and yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being on the panel and sharing your views. I would like to invite Dr. Nehru Prabhakaran for a short vote of thanks.
It's a great pleasure to be part of this wonderful event, and it's always a lot of things go behind organizing such a wonderful event like this. So I start thanking from the main source of this Dugong program, the Camp Out Dugong project initiated by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, India. Without their support, this entire network of uh, Dugong researchers and Dugong ambassadors in India would not have been possible. I thank Rakesh Jagania, IFS Deputy Inspector General, for joining us today, and I'm thankful to the Director, Wildlife Institute of India, and of course, we are very much thankful to the CMS Dugong MOU for providing us necessary support, and also providing a little bit of advertisement for this particular program. Um, and We are very much indebted to Professor Helen Marsh for her time and sharing with us her vast expanse of knowledge. And it's going to be a it's going to really help us in a long way, and I'm sure a lot of things would also come into place for the new status of dugongs all over the globe. And along with her, I also thank all the panel members, Dr. Ranil, Ms. Sapnali, Dr. Balaji, Dr. Akbar, and Dr. Anchana for sparing your time with us. We are very much thankful to that. And we are very much thankful to Dr. K. Sivakumar, professor from Pondicherry University, who was also one of the leaders of this particular Campa Dugong program. Thank you, sir, for being with us and supporting us in all the possible ways. And again, this particular program is a fruit of collaboration between a lot of institutions and individuals. So it's a vast expense, like Swapnali has mentioned, a lot of stakeholders involved in this program. So we are thankful to all of them, and we are thankful to all the participants for making this event more interactive. And thank you all. And not to mention our Campa Dugong team, which was doing a lot behind the scenes, and of course Chinmaya and Swapnali and whoever part of this. It's been a wonderful pleasure to be part of this team. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just,
Thank
just
our audience to
yeah,
join in. It's
yeah. Just to add the no, just to add the vote of thanks. The first, we need to thank the entire Dugang team. Actually, last 1 month they have been working. Actually, they have been conducting a lot of outreach program through this Dugang's Day celebration in the social media, and every day there's some other work they have been doing. Actually, this is the last one, so it was very fantastic. So on behalf of the entire Dugang lovers, I extend a great gratitude to the our Dugang team. So all the best.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you. Thank you
Goodbye.
so
Thank
much.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye
Have
bye.
a good
It was
one.
really
Bye
nice
bye.
meeting you.
Really nice.
See
Bye
you.
bye.
See you.
Bye.
Hi.